All right, welcome everybody. Today is actually the very first day of 2023 World Arts West live event. Yes, hi Saman. Welcome to Career Pathways Events Protection. We launched the Career Pathways program last year. So I'll talk a little bit about the program first. Welcome everybody. I am Huang, Executive Director of World Arts West. And we have Cristina Ibarra from Yerba Buena Garden Festival and Cynthia Taylor here from Roundtable, who will introduce in a moment. We're first going to begin with a land acknowledgement on behalf of World Arts West. On behalf of World Arts West and the San Francisco Bay Area artists, I acknowledge that we live and work on the unceded territories and ancestral lands of the Ohlone, Miwok, and Pomo peoples. We recognize their significant diversity and their critical place in the cultural and natural ecology of the region. We're grateful that they continue to care for the land, waters, and all of our relations through the living traditions and cultures of the native peoples here. We encourage all of our colleagues and fellow organizations to learn about and actively support the Indigenous communities in your area. Welcome, everyone. Before we talk about the program, just wanted everybody to know that the session is being recorded today, and we will share that on the World Arts West YouTube channel in a couple of weeks. The first section of this session will be speakers only, and the second section will have plenty of time for Q&A with the audience. If you'd like to ask questions throughout the session, please type your questions in the chat. If you type your questions into the chat while the speakers are speaking, we'll let the speakers, we may answer the questions during that portion or at the Q&A section. Before we bring the speakers, I just want to let everybody know that we launched the Career Pathways program last year to connect cultural artists with different careers supporting the cultural arts sector. Many of us have experienced performing in venues where we encounter production staff or cultural artists and have the cultural competency to support the artists. Today, our session is focused on events production. We have Cristina and Cynthia, two amazing cultural artists with seasoned events professionals. They will share their knowledge and expertise with us today about how they enter their career and some tips in succeeding the careers and some advice for the audience who may want to enter the events production career. All righty, first we'd like to introduce Miss Cynthia Taylor. Tell us a little bit about yourself and briefly tell us about your career. Cynthia, you're muted.
Lucky you. Hey, hi guys, this is Cynthia. Hey, Anne, thank you for the intro. Cristina, it's so great to be with everybody. I hope everyone's safe and hanging in there. Mother Nature is showing her power. And I'm so glad we're all here with, here we go, at Pathways. Because don't we all want to know, like, which trail should we take? How does this all add up into a career? So briefly, as I can, I come from both sides of the coin of events production. I'm a performer and a producer. So we're talking violin, vocalist, and I've been on stage in terms of musicals, operas, singing solo, fronting bands, ensemble work, choir work, backups, Oakland Opera Theater, Third Eye Blind, I just around the block, and then a good 20-year stint with Charming Hostess, which is a radical Jewish culture group that is on John Zorn's label. We just released our last album last year at this time. Check it out, Ginsberg Geography. And then in the world of production, as a performer, I was observing what was going on, but professionally, I really started with SF Jazz. So to keep you hooked, My first day as a PR intern with SF Jazz was at Davies Symphony Hall, first day. And I was a college senior, and we're talking the 80s here, 90s, excuse me, 90s. And well, my job was to open the door at the side of the stage for Dizzy Gillespie to go on and off the Davies Symphony Hall stage. And there was like a little TV camera so I could see him walking towards the wall, because if you've been in Davies, it's seamless and you can't tell where the door is. And many an artist has gone like right into the door. So my job was to open the door strategically at the right time so he could just gracefully keep walking without hurting his pace. And I was hooked, you guys. I was hooked at what it took backstage so that everyone could enjoy him. I then worked at SF Jazz for 5 years as an artist liaison. I stage managed, I MC hosted. I was a volunteer manager. I coordinated all air, ground, transportation, hotel accommodations, to get to sound check, to press interviews, to the actual show itself, to get them back out of town. Some of them are touring artists, some were local. So varying degrees of detail. And then running the volunteers and training them to be a part of the team, because they were the drivers, they're the ushers. Oh my goodness, so many jobs for volunteers. And I then started moonlighting so that I could learn how other places did it. I did it through jobs and volunteering. So I volunteered at Yoshi's, the old Yoshi's, and I created with FileMaker the whole database on how to organize all the production details and volunteer management. And I learned so much. I also then was the house manager at night at Yerba Buena Center for the Arts, and then ended up being an events manager there. And that was before Yerba Buena Gardens, when Yerba Buena Center for the Arts managed the gardens. And we did all the breakouts for Moscone, and then there was the theater and the forum, and then of course the big openings and everything with the lobby. We're talking the era when they were about to build the Metreon. Okay, so this is how long I've been doing it, and how I've seen our area change through venues. I then worked at Oasis for Girls, and then was doing more intimate, youth appropriate program planning. So this will come up that you need to know your audience, you need to know your performers, and different generations demand and need different types of support. And then I was at the Oakland Museum of California for 11 years, where I ran the production, the public and community engagement programs with a mighty team. And we had intimate single venue events like lectures, films, to multi-venue, site-specific, 4 square box, 7 acres, full-on festivals, whether they were culturally, community, just the whole gamut. And what you might be recognize is our Dia de los Muertos festival that has been going on for over 20 years, the Lunar New Year Festival. Those are one time a year, okay? Different than Friday Nights at OMC, which was like 45 to 48 consecutive Fridays throughout the year. And in my reign, it was about 8 years in person, a year online. And I'm really proud that it's still going today. And coming out of this era, well, let's hope out of this era. And then I went over to the Presidio Tunnel Tops, opened up the Presidio Tunnel Tops Park, worked with community co-curators such as World Arts West, Hip Hop for Change, and of course the Presidio partnership with the National Park Service and the Golden Gate National Park Conservancy. So that was a massive effort for free outdoor concerts. So in this, and now I'm at Montalvo Arts down in my hometown of Saratoga, again, with indoor and outdoor venues. We'll talk more about the different types of venues, but this is to show you that over 30 years, I've worked multiple different types of events, some with security, some with without. I've had, when you go through the metal detectors, up at the Mountain Winery when I was in college, I actually had to check purses before people went in, the audience went in. So I've seen a lot. I haven't seen it all, but I've seen a lot. And it takes a team effort. And every single one of these experiences was full of incredible teamwork and collaboration that was all preparing for the actual production implementing the production and then learning from the production and going on to the next step. And that is my pathway to today.
Wow, thank you so much, Cynthia. We're going to do a deeper dive in your pathway in a moment. You know, this program, Career Pathway, really was created to peel back the mysterious curtain of different kinds of careers supporting the cultural arts sector. So because we are a presenter, we get asked a lot of questions like, wow, how do I get to work in your festival? Who are those people that are working at your events? What are those titles? How do I get started? Once I get started, how do I move up? So I know you will all talk about that. But for the audience, I'm sure a lot of you have these questions today, and we have audience who are here today, but also audience who signed up for the event who are not able to be here today, who will get a recording to get this information. So Cristina, I'd love for you to take a moment to share with us briefly your career trajectory.
Yeah, thank you, Anne. Thank you, World Arts West staff. And I see lots of friends in the virtual audience, so it's good to see everybody. My name is Cristina Ibarra. I'm Strategic Projects Director at Yerba Buena Gardens Festival. And I bow down to Cynthia and all of her experience over 30 years. My path, hey Thais, my path has been about 15 years. I'm about half of that into my career now. I moved to San Francisco in 2009. I started working with a nonprofit called ArtSpan for several years. ArtSpan runs Open Studios, which is a visual arts event, but it's over 400 artists participating all over the quadrants of San Francisco. And through that, we did open studios, we did professional development, we did fundraisers, we did performances, all you can name it. Meanwhile, while I was doing that, I moonlighted at a small but lovely space in the Mission that many of you may know, the Red Poppy Art House. And I was lured in by the candlelight and the tiny living room where you could experience these concerts where there was no barrier between the artists and the audience, and I just fell in love. I started hosting events there and emceeing and learning really by accident how to house manage a show from top to bottom. A very small show, but it really struck a chord, and I realized that that's what I was born to do. Met a lot of local artists, built a ton of relationships. And through that, I ended up starting to curate and starting to produce grassroots events through Mission Arts Performance Project, also known as MAP in the Mission, as a performing artist, as a curator, as a cultural organizer. And then I even started an event venue in my own backyard at one point. So, production, bringing it home. And then in 2015, I started working with Yerba Buena Gardens Festival, which I know a lot of the people in the audience have been there, performed there, know it well. But for those of you that don't, it's a 3-block public space in downtown San Francisco. Behind me, you can see a crowd for one of our concerts that we have all summer. They're free, they're outdoors, they're mostly local, but we also bring touring artists. And I started as an event staff there and worked my way up through the ranks, learning all the ins and outs of event production, building upon all of the things that I had learned at previous jobs. When I said that I knew how to coil an XLR cable, they were like, oh, all right, she's a keeper. But there, at Yerba Buena Gardens Festival, we do over 100 events every year. All of them are outdoors. That's over 75 performing arts programs, kids programs, theater, dance, music, salsa nights. But we also do, about 20 to 30 corporate events every year as well. That's how Yerba Buena Gardens Festival funds its free programming. So I also got to learn a lot about the corporate events world, working with event planners, working with very, very big budgets, very, very complex clients, a lot of high touch clients. So that was a really interesting experience. That has been a really interesting experience. Another side of the coin of the events production, even if you are an artist and you want to work in arts events, you will always be dealing with private rentals as well in most venues that you work at. And then during the pandemic, I worked with Women's Audio Mission for just a year, and we had a great schedule of in-person events. And then, of course, those couldn't happen. So I became a digital events producer and produced over 70 digital events on Zoom, on StreamYard, working with OBS, all of these different things, not knowing, as none of us did, how to produce digital events, but we made it through. And I hope never to produce a digital event again in my life. But if you need to do it, I can show you how. And like Cynthia, I'm also an artist and my community is artists. So I'm always looking through that lens in all of these jobs. And, you know, Cynthia shared her first events gig, so I will share mine. It was not as glamorous. I worked a catering job. That was my first event, and I knocked over the wedding cake. And I'm just sharing that for all of you who are wanting to get into events production. I did probably the worst thing you can do at an event, and I didn't get fired, and I learned something, and I realized at that moment that the event is never over. There's nothing so bad that can't be recovered from. And that has been a lifelong lesson. So not as fancy as Dizzy Gillespie, but it is a story that I pull out a lot. And I'm very, very honored to be here with Cynthia and with Anne. And I can't wait to talk to you all about your experiences and your questions.
Wow, the show must go on. Yes, yes, yes. Great. Now we're gonna go chronological, go in the beginning, right? We want to hear from Cristina, Cynthia. How did you enter events production for the artists who perform in events, who go to events, and wow, I'd like to be doing events production. How do I enter? I heard two things from both speakers. I think Cynthia talked about getting started as a volunteer. Cristina says something about, oh, I started at Yerba Buena Garden Festival as event staff. I worked my way up, the concept of working my way up. So from the beginning, if you could just share a little bit with the audience, how did you enter, and any tips for the artists in the audience who would like to actually enter in the beginning, enter this career?
Okay, I'm not muted anymore. Wow, Cristina. That was, you know, you got to start. And whether it's a paid gig or a free gig, you need to observe and dive in. You've got to dive in. So I really recommend that. What do you love the most? Why do you want to learn more? Like, because it might be discipline based. It might be that you love watching dance and you want to know how that happens. So start to understand yourself on why you're attracted to it. You might be someone who wants to be a stage manager on Broadway, and you're like, cue lights, get on stage left. Like you may be like a sergeant and want to run the show. You may be somebody who is the high touch customer service person that greets people and makes sure that the audience experience is fabulous. You may be, I was an artist. I wanted to understand if a contract, to understand what do you ask for in a writer? I wanted to understand, how do you get a gig? So I thought, well, maybe I should work at some gigs. And that's what I kind of touched upon is starting at the Mountain Winery as an usher and just observing. But then I started going backstage and saying, hey, I finished, everything up here. How can I help you? So then I'm pressing fresh carrot juice, for the artists. And then I started thinking not just of the audience experience, which is where I entered the scene as an audience member, but the artist experience and how are you hospitable backstage? And then I got all into that. So I would look at, one, do you know somebody? Can you shadow them? That comes to, which I'm sure it will come up over and over again, is who's your mentor? Who's in your kitchen cabinet? And if we do a good job today, then we can be in your kitchen cabinet. And that's like when you want to pull out a spice, you just like, oh, I need to understand this. You need to know who to call. Who's the red bat phone? I know I'm just aging myself out here, but observe. And then whether it's paid or not. So I did a lot of moonlighting while I was working full time. I didn't mention, but I also moonlit down at Stanford Music Department, the Stanford Jazz Workshop, like just get as much experience as. Sometimes you have to volunteer to do that. And people love good people. and then you get rewarded, and then you get shooed into jobs, because when you need somebody, you need them. What do
Yeah,
you?
so Cynthia, what I'm hearing from you is also like, doesn't really matter what the position is or positions are, especially when you're starting out, just get in there
Get
and
in the
get in there.
scene.
If you can get a paid position, fine. If
Yeah.
not, try to volunteer. And organizations are always looking for volunteers, right?
Yes. Reliable people.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Cristina, do you want to talk a little bit about, I guess 2 questions, how did you get started? Any advice for people in the audience who would like to enter the sector, and any tips for them?
Yeah, similar to Cynthia, I volunteered at a ton of places, and we are really, really lucky in the Bay Area that there are so many arts organizations and venues. You can really pick the one that you care about, that you would want to work at, and get to know the people that work there through a volunteer position, and get a sense of what it's like on the inside. I mean, I'm just looking at the participant list, and I'm seeing, 5 different organizations that probably have events that will need good volunteers. And if you do volunteer for something, try to do it in a skill that will actually benefit you. So if you want to do front of house, if you want to be on the customer facing side, volunteer for a position that involves that, so you can really show off, so you can really shine, and that you can really pick up some of the tricks of the trade. If you're looking for back of house, if you want to be event production, again, look for those kind of things. Look to see if you can be the person that takes the mics off the stage, or even sweeps the stage during the dance performances. That becomes the stage manager pretty soon, right? You want people, you want to show that you are trustworthy and responsible and timely, but it's not really rocket science. It's really just a curiosity and a good energy that people want to have around you when events happen. At Yerba Buena Gardens Festival, when I started to work there, I had just left another job, and I really kind of wanted something low responsibility. So I came in as an event staff. I came in entry level. Even though I had done events before, I wanted to learn how it was done outdoors. I wanted to learn how it was done in a public space. And so I really came with a beginner's mind. I really didn't come, except for the XLR cable, I really didn't come saying that I knew how to do anything, because I wanted to see how it was done at this particular venue. And I think, if you don't really know what you want to do yet, kind of think of how you are at a party, right? Are you the one in the kitchen? Are you the one who's introducing yourself to people? Are you the one who's like, sees that the salad is running low, and so you want to go tell the host that you have to refill the salad? Those kind of things will sort of give you a sense of whether you're a front of house person or you're a back of house person, because the people that are in the kitchen and are kind of like getting the plates ready and all of that, or refilling the drinks without anybody asking them to, those are great back of house people, because they have the spidey sense, they have the sixth sense for something that the artist is going to need, or something that the audience is going to need, before they even know it. If you're the person that's like doing the icebreakers, that's introducing so-and-so to so-and-so, you're going to be a great usher, you're going to be a great front of house person, you're going to be a great volunteer coordinator, because you're getting to know people. You want to be that sunny personality on the outside. Maybe you'll be the MC, or maybe you'll be the host of that event. So think about what kind of person you're at the party. If you get into a party and you're like, okay, I'm clocking my exit, and I'm like seeing where people are putting their shoes and stuff, maybe you want to be the person who's going to be like the emergency preparedness lead, or like you're the person that's going to have the game plan that people are going to look to when stuff goes down. The events will need that too. So that's kind of advice that I would give. If you're not really sure, think about who you would be at a party that your friend would throw.
Oh my God, I love that.
Wow.
I
Your events production archetype. I think there's somebody in the audience who's a seasoned palm reader. Maybe we should.
yes, there is.
Yeah.
If you're the talent at the party, then that's
right.
That's a role too.
Are you the one who picks up the karaoke mic? Are you the one who asks everybody, why are you late? And they're telling you, oh, parking, or oh, there was 5 events tonight, and I'm like, I'm on a party, Mhm.
I will say too, because we haven't touched on it yet, and maybe we'll get to it, Anne, and you can tell me to wait. But we're talking a lot about what happens when the event is already on, but a whole other role of this event production piece is the admin and the stuff
Mhm.
leading up to the event. So in that
Mhm.
party analogy, if you're the friend that other friends are like, I don't want to book the Airbnb, or I don't want to look at flights, but you're like, oh, I got that. I have a spreadsheet for that. I know exactly when to buy the tickets. Maybe you're the admin person. Maybe you're the person that's going to deal with the contracting and the permitting and the advancing of the writers and all of that
How
stuff.
much money to spend?
How much? Yeah, the budgets. That's a whole other side of this event
Mhm.
production
Oh
piece.
my God, you're
That's
so
excellent,
so
because that
good.
was my next question, as people, again, I'm trying to go chronologically, as people begin to enter events production, whether they're a volunteer or they've got their first job, right? And they're wondering like, wow, what are the positions? What are the jobs? What are the career pathways? What does it mean front of house? What does it mean backstage?
Yeah, yeah.
What is Cristina talking about? Admin. Wow, are there things that happen? So could you elaborate a little bit of sort of within the career pathway of events production? What are the pathways, however you want to categorize them? Is there like a front of house pathway? What are those positions? Is there like back of house pathway? What are those positions? What about admin? And what about year-round staff, seasonal staff, event day staff? Maybe you can just kind of talk about that a little bit, because as people are trying to put themselves on the pathway, if they don't know what is the pathway, right? Like they're at the first step of it, they don't know what are the different pathways, then it's
Mhm.
hard kind of decide in the pathway. But that was great analogy, Christina. Who am I at a party?
My
So
God, you've got to copyright that. So good. So good.
so
So good.
who would like to take a stab at within the career pathways events production, what are the different pathways?
Um, I think I'd like to take a stab at it. And I think I want to break it up into a full-time job versus seasonal job, which is a time-specific job. I'll give you an example. When I was at SF Jazz, I was an intern first, then I got hired, and we had an events director who managed getting ready for the festival, the SF Jazz Festival. Half the year she was preparing for the SF Jazz Festival. And when that was over, she then went to New Orleans and then was on their seasonal staff to prepare for the New Orleans Jazz Festival. So I was working with people that one had a full-time job, health benefits, raising money year round, building local relationships. And then there were the seasonal pros that were coming in and out of our lives with a different employment contract. So I'm thinking about like that there's the permanent lifestyle and career choice. And then there's those who fly in and fly out. There are unions for certain positions. So now I'm going to break down very briefly, because I know Christina's gonna have a good analogy for this, is that there's back of house and front of house. That is really for the actual day of the event. Okay. So back of house is everything behind the curtain. All right, if there's a curtain, but it's everything behind the curtain, the lip of the stage, right? So in front of the stage, some stages, there's a pit, right? For the orchestra, right? Then there's the stage. And the old days, it was tilted. So I used to have nightmares that we were falling into the pit as a performer. So back of stage is everything that happens behind the stage to get the artist on the stage. Back of house is not being the artist. It is everything to get the show to start and end on time. So that is such as lighting, audio, the producer, the stage manager, sometimes the stage manager team. You've got the stage setup. You've got to have muscle, right? Maybe there's changeovers on the stage of backline is like the instruments. If there are multiple bands, maybe they all share the same drum kit and the same bass and the same keyboard or piano. And those always stay on the stage, but then everything else changes. But you have to create space between those, right? Okay, so there's like changing over the stage. Then there's also the dressing rooms, the hospitality, the security, someone to make sure who's on the list to be backstage to protect your artists. And then you've also got like the equipment. So their back of house also is about ordering the right equipment, maintaining it, keeping it safe, returning it after the show. Whereas front of house, you've got box office, the press table, the VIP table, sponsor table, merchandise, concessions, seating, where your customer service, front of house is the public facing customer service wing of event, whereas back of house is the Oz behind the curtain to make the magic happen. Those people don't get seen. The back of house is invisible. You just go the show and go, and we're skating around, whether it's like a trio or it's Hamilton or, there's so many lecture or film or multimedia. The tech is, those jobs are growing as technology grows. So it's not just levels of sound anymore. It is also video, live, web, Wi-Fi, and then lighting designers, right? So it is an enormous team effort, collaboration, whether it's front of house or back of house. And I would call admin part of the back of house because they're unseen, but everyone knows how to chip in. Everyone's got their favorite jobs to chip in when it matters, because event production is emergency preparedness, because all you're doing, once you get to the actual day of, you are troubleshooting. So you have to know every detail. So you're just doing workarounds. All the planning you do, you just never know what's going to happen in real time.
Thank you, Cynthia. That was a great point in that, again, pulling the curtain, right? The audience sees something beautiful and the final product, but oftentimes the audience does not know. Yeah, there is so much, just like what are all the potential disasters that could happen, and we want to address them in real time or beforehand, all that kind of stuff. A lot of jobs are like that. Cristina, do you have anything to add regarding what Cynthia said? Again, the original question was the different career pathways within the career pathways of events production.
Yeah, kind of picking up where Cynthia was leaving off. The admin side is a whole other part of this event production that usually comes with the full-time position, right? Rather than a seasonal position. And I'll just give kind of an example of how we work at the festival. So we have a very long season. It's a 6-month season from May to October typically. And you would think that, great, we have a down season from November to April, right? No, definitely not. Even leaving out all of the reporting that we all have to do right after a program ends. You have to do the postmortems and the feedback and the follow-up and the reports and all of that. Our planning has already started when the season is underway. So when I'm talking about planning and admin, you are researching artists. You're definitely always going to see shows. This is if you're on the artistic or the curatorial side, but even if you're not, we at our organization recommend everybody see as much art as possible, because it's all about building relationships, especially if you're working with local artists, as we all know here. It's never the YouTube video that's going to get you booked. It's like knowing the artists well and knowing how they work and whether they're going to work for your particular venue. So we're doing a lot of research. We're doing a lot of seeing art. We're doing a lot of talking to artists. We're doing a lot of meetings. This happens when the current season is already happening, and it goes all the way up to the next season opening. And then you get into the booking process and working with artists and agents and managers. Some artists are self-represented, some have managers, some have agents, some are big agencies, some are self-managed, some are small. There's a whole range, and it has no reflection on the quality of the artist or anything like that. It just, some get to the level where they need a bigger team or want a bigger team, and some can perfectly do it by themselves. But you have lots of conversations that happen with those. Okay, like what's going to go on in the booking process? Is the event ready to go? Negotiating the writers, the offers, all of these different things. And then you get to, okay, the event's going to happen, whether it's a concert or it's a film series or speaking, whatever it is. Then you have to talk about the contracts. And so then you have to, I drafted 30 contracts today, you guys, 30 contracts. And that's not even half of what we do. That's like a third of what we do. It's a lot of admin. It's a lot of admin. So drafting contracts, being really detail oriented, making sure all of your T's are crossed and your I's are dotted, and you've got the right amount on every contract. That's very important. You don't say that you're going to offer anything that you can't offer, all of those things. Sometimes then there's a negotiation process where the management team will need something else. You have to decide whether you can give that or not. So there's negotiation that comes into that. So if you're really good at communicating and negotiating deals, this is a really great strength to have for this part of the from the advancing process. And advancing, is a word used in event production to just basically describe everything that comes before the show, everything from, what the offer is going to be, how much the artists are getting paid, to like, where am I going to park when I get there? It's all kind of under this big umbrella of what happens in advance of the show. So I'd say that the skills that you need for that, again, are being really, really a good communicator, very, very detail oriented, very good at sticking to timelines, and not afraid to ask for what you need when you need it. Because most events, they are, you're not the only event that they're doing. So they're communicating with 30 other venues, whatever it has been. So you really have to kind of keep people on track and like herd cats, as they say. And then you also have to think about things like certificates of insurance. If they're bringing in a big group and you need to make sure that they're covering their production on their side as well as your side, you have to make sure that the insurance requirements are matching up. Permits, depending on, we're in an outdoor public space, so we have to get every single event permitted. And no matter, like, depending on how many elements there are, you might have to work with Department of Public Works, you might have to work with the health department, you might have to get a fire marshal to come and clear the event. So you have to know all of that. Again, all of these kind of admin tasks, the skills are really being very detail oriented, being able to stick to timelines, being able to, get those papers pushed.
Yes.
And it's not necessarily the fun part, but it really is like, you're kind of like a clock maker, right? All of the cogs fitting in so that the event can go off without a hitch. So that's just a very small
the art of
part of the admin.
You have to be able to make a deal. That whole negotiation, you're also doing that with funders. You're also convincing people to invest in you and who you want to invest it in. And then you get to negotiate the contract with the actual talent. So the talent of the staff is as important as the talent of who you're going to feature in your production. Oh, Cristina, that's so right. And with the permits, something you just brought up, I think it's really important that everyone knows their venue, because every venue is different. And what you need for an outdoor venue is some things are the same. Some things are the same no matter what. It's about where you're going to house the event. But every place is different on what the rules of engagement are. In terms of permitting, how late can you make sound in that area? Is it a county thing? Is it a neighborhood thing? Do you have to inform the neighbors? Oh my goodness. Communication, relationships, negotiation. Cristina, you hit they're all right there. And some of them are city government. Some of them are community members. And some of them are artists. All of those skills are needed. No event happens without a massive collaboration team in the admin world who have the right tools on how they're tracking the information, sharing the information, full detail versus the abridged version. It's, I think it's like when someone, when I'd say where I work, right? And everyone's like, oh, how fun. And I'm like, well, if I do my job right, everyone's going to have fun. But I think like if someone says, oh, I work at Disneyland, you're thinking like, when I go to Disneyland, it's so much fun. Oh my God, how fun for you. But, it's different to put on the show. And it's not that it's not fun. Don't get me wrong. It's fun. And I want you to be careful. I want you to stay hydrated. I don't want you to get all on caffeine and sugar. Let's stay hydrated, y'all. I think I did 5 years at SF Jazz, like on Coca-Cola. Not a good idea. I was young. Not a good idea. You want to build sustainable practices because it's a lot of work. It's emergency preparedness. And as we like to say, all events end. There are no art emergencies, although all you feel like you're doing is like a fireman. You're just putting out fires. Everything that can go wrong at some point will go wrong or go to the side. Betty Carter has left the vehicle. You just never know what the radio's about to tell you about what's happened, and then you've got to troubleshoot it. So I wanted to also touch that you had brought up timelines and timeliness.
Yeah.
Really important.
Thank you both. Very, very helpful. In about 5 minutes, we're going to open up to the audience for general Q&A. But I want to mention that Cristina started mentioning sort of some arts administration jobs. This is the third Career Pathways Roundtable dialogue. Our first one was philanthropy, second one education, this events production. Our next Career Pathway Roundtable is going to focus on arts administration. We're going to have 3 speakers, one focusing on programming, second is focusing on the development pathway, and the third focusing on marketing pathway. So these are sort of common arts administration jobs. Cristina made a good point regarding like, if you want to have a full-time job working in the arts, working in events production, if you're working specific events, they're not necessarily like year round, but those admin jobs is where sort of events, admin jobs at an arts organization that does event, that is where like those full-time jobs are. I want to say that the sort of the typical hierarchy of titles, if you want to think about entering and then rising up, of course, you can start as a volunteer, but then the first entry jobs are usually called assistants, like program assistant. And the second tier is usually called associate or coordinator, like program coordinator or program associate. Then the third tier is called manager, like program manager. And then the fourth tier is a director, program director. And the same thing with sort of other arts admin jobs, which we will discuss at length at the next Career Pathways Roundtable. So please be on the lookout for that event. I'm just gonna.
Before we move on, I just wanted to add really briefly, because I'm again seeing kind of who's in the room, and I know that there's lots of folks who have produced their own events and produced their own mini festivals and really, really incredible events. And I will also say that not so much in my current work, but in my other jobs, definitely have worked with event consultants who know how to kind of bring an event from top to bottom together. And that's more of a freelance job where you're able to like create your own schedule. A lot of artists that I know are also event consultants or event facilitators because they have that natural talent for knowing the arc of an event, but they maybe don't have the time within their creative schedule to be able to commit to a full-time job. So I just want to offer that out. I know a lot of different venues will hire for specific creative event consultants for a specific event or for a specific program thread. That is also another way to kind of get into the business.
Great. Thank you, Cristina. Very, very helpful. We are scheduled to officially in 2 minutes, speaking of running the show on time, to go to audience Q&A. But I just want to now begin to sort of encourage the audience to enter your questions in the chat. I'm a moderator. Either I'll read your question, or if I don't really understand your question, then I'll ask you to kind of elaborate on your question. So for everybody who is part of this Zoom meeting now, feel free to kind of enter your questions, whatever questions you have regarding events production, specific or general. And then I want to pivot to speakers. We have been kind of talking about the different positions, the different pathways. And then could you give, I'm kind of thinking like, could you give an example? I mean, both of you have had very expansive career. Could you give an example of, maybe a slice of your career advancement within your expansive career? Like I went from this to that. An example of, when a person is in that position, oh, these are the maybe next 2 to 3 to 4 positions I could go to from your own life. Do you have an example that you could share?
Yeah, I mean, I think Cynthia and I both shared, we kind of started at the bottom and worked up. But I would say that, I think that the pathway is a good word because you take one step at a time. But a mentor once told me that when you work in the arts, it's less of having like a roadmap and it's more of like pulling up at like a jungle with a machete and like hacking your way through, like, because I feel like for creative people like us, we see the yellow brick road and we're like, oh, that looks pretty boring. Like I can see what's at the end of it. And so I think that most of us, and myself certainly, have kind of like just put one foot in front of the other, and yes, have gone from a events coordinator to manager to director. But I would also say that, like with the next foot, it might be off of on a different path. And I think just honoring whatever your path is the way to go, because for creative people, it's rarely going to be, like a yellow brick road line to the Emerald City. It's more likely going to be like through the woods, and you have to kind of like cut your way through and find that, support system that's gonna keep you there. Yeah.
So true. The path is not always this clear.
Yeah,
It's not always that clear.
Yeah, and this roundtable was created to aim to, not lay out everything linearly, because this is not a linear career path, but at least to kind of, I used the expression of pull back the curtain of
Right. Right.
We have our lovely friend, dear friend, Jen Tate in the audience. Balance of being a performer and an arts support role. Is that your question, Jen? If you want to come on camera to ask your question, how do you balance between being a performer and arts support role? Is that your question?
Come on down, Jen Tate. Come on down. Yeah, the world is small, everyone. The world is very small too in production events. Like you run into the same people. Yeah, Jen Tate.
So how I guess, both of you are performers, Cynthia and Cristina. How do you balance being a performer and events production professional? And Cynthia used the word sustainability. Like, how do you sustain? This is physically can be very, very difficult. Like, how do you sustain a career in general?
Yeah,
So
production work.
Question.
Production work is a workout. You don't need a gym membership if you're working in production. It's long hours, and usually there's an after party, which you're all hopped up and ready to rumble because you just went through something together. It's extremely bonding to go through a production together. Extremely, it's just delicious. In terms of balancing, well, one, when you're young, you just don't sleep that much. But there is a legal clause called conflict of interest. Right. So there is also balancing being really good at both things, but also not crossing the line to produce yourself under someone else, like in the wrong, institutionally. Like it's one thing to produce yourself in a venue that you've rented. It's another to produce yourself it's a conflict of interest. If you work in an institution, if you work for an organization that's paying you full time, then there's a little more negotiating and a little more judgment call on if it's a conflict of interest, if you perform there too. So in terms of balancing a human being, for me, my performance life and my administrative life in production and programming, they feed each other. It is all of me. So it makes me think of when Facebook came out back in the day, that I remember deciding that, okay, Facebook is all of me. It's my friends. It's where I grew up. It's where I work. It's the students I have. It's for all ages. I remember feeling like, okay, that platform, it's all Cynthia, not Cindy. Whereas LinkedIn is my day job that provides my benefits and where I want the linear growth of my title to show up, and the quality of what I could contribute to a team. And then, of course, back in the day, MySpace or Bandcamp is then where you would showcase your performance life. So you don't have to categorize your life like that. And Jen, I think the hardest part is really doing that balance. If I'm not doing both, I'm out of balance. But I have to admit that, like, it gets tired. Like, what I used to be able to do and what I can do now is not the same. But for me, the holistic Cynthia needs both of them. And they validate each other, and they're both street cred for both industries. I think it's absolutely a benefit to work with a creative person who understands the creative process and performance of any type, and knows how to produce their butt off. That is a left brainer and a right brainer. That is that's a Jen Tate.
Thank you, Cynthia. There's a question that I guess a question in a point that's come up in our cultural artist community a lot, which is sometimes a challenge, which is cultural artists going into venues and many times experiencing, I don't know if it's sort of like lost in translation or working with event staff that may not understand, wow, there's a secret object. They're working with cultural artists in general, right? Just sort of needing to be able to bridge that gap between what the cultural artists need and what the production people need, and come so that so everybody has a positive experience. So, one of the goals of like this Career Pathway program is to get more cultural artists working in events production, so that when we go to venues and we work with those admin people to realize our events that there's a lot of sort of cultural competency already. So I want to ask both Cristina and Cynthia, both of your cultural artists, how do you bring yourself as a cultural artist to work with cultural artists when you are producing events? What are things you remind yourself? What are the questions that you always make sure you ask the artist? Maybe we can start with Cristina.
Oh, it's a really good question. And I think, first of all, just humility. You got to come with humility, because just because you're an artist doesn't mean you know this particular art form, and doesn't actually mean you know anything, because you come with your own lens, but the artist that you've invited to share their creative process and their creative talents has a completely different lens. So I think first coming with humility and building a relationship instead of just booking talent. You'll be able to identify what kind of presenter or what kind of venue you are working with by the type of language they use. Like, some people talk about buying talent or booking talent. So you make that decision as a presenter, as a stage manager, at whatever point you're at. And then also in that particular moment, right, I had worked with this particular artist before. And so because of that relationship, I could say, look, this is where we're at. I want to give you as much time as possible. Can we meet in the middle in a way that is honoring this presentation? And he was so great about it. And he's like, yes. And next time we need to do this, in a way. And so then the next time we do this event, we talk to the producers and say, look, this artist that you gave 15 minutes needs 45 minutes, period. And so it's that humility piece, and it's working through that. And it's always centering the artist or the cultural practitioner first above any other concerns.
Yes.
Oh, so beautiful.
Yes.
Thank you so much,
Okay.
Cristina. Cynthia, how do you show up as a culture?
I couldn't agree. I couldn't agree more. There are different types of presenters. Some are, they're all a business. We're in a capitalistic society. There's money matters. Where the money comes from matters. Your pay rate matters. And I think that it matters who you're working for. It matters where you're working. And why are you presenting people? Why are you producing anything in the first place? So know the team you're joining to produce things. You know, it's working at the Warfield is different than working at Red Poppy. So that is like, understand everyone has a business model, but if in their mission, if in the way in their language, as you mentioned, if they're centering the artistic process, practice, this utter sharing of something so vulnerable and something so rich, you can tell by the language, if you're partnering, if you're shining the spotlight on it, if you're honored at all, if you're just running you do have to stay on a timeline, but these are all negotiating points. And if you create space, then you have room for the magic that you can't plan. You have no idea how many of the best things you've ever witnessed as an audience member was not planned, because there was enough space for them to actually bounce off the energy of the audience, whether it was intimate or big. It is so magical. Do not overstuff a timeline of a show. Leave room for the magic of the artist to build that relationship with the audience. Their show reflects all that energy, and it needs air to breathe. It needs, like yeast, it's got to rise. And I agree with absolutely everything that was said. And I just really, yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I want to make sure we take time to address Katie's question. I think Cristina, you want to answer that question definitely. So let me just read the question from Katie. Hi, Katie. Transitioning from a performer, choreographer, producer to apply for different jobs in existing arts organizations. What are the best things to include in a resume? I find it difficult fitting everything in, or maybe what is the best way to organize an arts admin resume, and especially in this sort of events production path, right? Like you had sort of a job here, a job there, then how do you organize your story? You
got to take a lifestyle into a resume.
Yeah, Cristina, I think you wanted to take a crack at it, right? Because you already have a note in the chat.
Oh my gosh, Kati, I've had this problem and I don't know if I've solved it, but I will say that one thing that had helped me a lot is less is more. So kind of like when you're packing for a trip, and then you're supposed to like unpack and then cut it in half. Definitely do that with your resume, first of all, because a resume for an arts admin job is not a CV. You want to be able to include all of your artistic accomplishments, but most likely that's not what they're looking for to hire for an arts admin job. So take your best 3 admin experiences that show off your skills for that particular position. Even if you've had 10 jobs that address that, pick your top most flashy 3 that are going to get the person like, ooh, that sounds like they're definitely fitting the skills. And if you have a lot of things that you want to share, I would say use your first page to kind of be like the showing that you fit the description that they're hiring for and that you can do it really, really well. And then use the second page, or even if you need a third page, to list your accomplishments and your performances and different things, because that's what people, they do want to know that. But if you're applying for an organization in an admin position, a long artistic CV is going to be really overwhelming. And those things will come out in conversation in the interview process or in the getting to know you process. And you can shine in those parts. But they're really going to be looking for, like, does this person fit the skills that this job description is for? And I really, really recommend just cutting out more than you think you need to include and just do your top 3, and have someone from a different industry as well look over it and ask just, hey, does this make sense? When I'm looking at resumes, I look for clarity first, and then content, and then the cool stuff, like in that order, right? I want to see that they know, that they've read, that they know how to present themselves, and use your cover letter to show your passion. It doesn't need to show up on your resume, for example. That's would be my advice. And I would love to, and use Canva. Use Canva for resume templates. It's a free design thing, canva.com. It has a lot of really, really beautifully designed resumes. And if you struggle with having like just walls of text, they have some really nice ones there.
Yeah.
Wow, I love that, Cristina. Your resume is not your CV. So sometimes too much information can be kind of confusing to the reader.
For arts admin jobs, yeah.
Yeah, make them want more. Make them want more. And look at the job description. And just like the keywords that are in there, those are the keywords that you want to highlight in your resume. And I cannot emphasize enough about your network. When you're applying for a job at anywhere, look who's on the staff.
All right, we are at the moment when I say the show must go on. So we're gonna go back to Cynthia in a moment. There's a question. We actually have room for one more question. And oh, here you go, Cynthia. Go ahead, continue.
Hi, sorry. Ooh, technology. Look at who's on staff at the organization you want to work at, who's on the advisory committee, who's on the board. This is a very small world. It's all about your network. People who are looking for someone, you ask the right person, they say, I know exactly who you should call. So I want you to think about who you've been working with, and if any of them have a connection to anyone working at a place that you want to work, and then just be real strategic. The words in the job description are the words you want to highlight. You're going to also want to emphasize that you're a team player. No one needs a diva. I mean, you need a diva on the stage, but you need a team player. So if you're a collaborator, if you're a relationship builder, like find ways to show that you can be reliable to get it done and work on your own, but that it's all about the team and that the team makes sure the show goes on.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. We have either one or two questions from our new board member, Samad. Samad, can you just like ask your question or come on camera and ask your question? I'm not quite clear what your question or questions are.
Yes. Hey, everyone. Hello, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. First of all, thank you to World Arts West for putting this platform together. Thank you for our panelists, Cristina, also Cynthia. Thanks for sharing your expertise. Yeah, I think what's prompting me to ask this question has to do with what I'm currently dealing with in SFUSD. We put on a number of productions each year, and some of the meetings in preparation for these productions are interesting because conflicts arise, differences of opinion when it comes to collaboration comes up. And I don't really feel like we have a protocol established. And so I'm interested to know if these things do happen within your work circles, how are they dealt with? And differences of opinion can have to do with the themes around the events, who you're partnering with, outside organizations that you're working with. So all of that.
Yes. Yes. The more people involved, the more.
Cristina, you want to?
Until Cynthia comes back, I think what she was going to say is the more people involved, the more difficult and complicated it gets. And I do think that that's true. And I can't speak to particulars because it sounds like there might be some different things going on. But I would say in my experience, finding out where the openings are and where the brick walls are is kind of the place to start. So if it's a difference of opinion in terms of themes or partners, figuring out, like, is it because you work at a school and there's a legal department that's not allowing you to work with a particular partner, or if there's a bureaucratic aspect that's not allowing you to have a particular type of event. That channel is going to be different versus if it's like an interpersonal dynamic that, you know, within the group of teachers or the group of school administrators that you're working with, they just kind of don't want to go outside the box. And, you know, one is like, if it's a bureaucratic thing, you kind of have to figure out how much you can work with that. Can you push it? Who's the person to ask? And if it's an interpersonal thing, you have to sort of figure out who your allies are. And this is such a good question, because this is like, we work in public space. So we have so many interconnected stakeholders, right? The public, city entities, a host of nonprofits, for-profit, small businesses, and everybody has their own agenda and everybody wants something slightly different. So my approach is always, you catch more flies with honey than vinegar, right? Try to figure out who your allies are, try to figure out also what the actual concerns are, like where the roadblocks are, getting specific about that, and then figuring out for yourself too, if it's worth it to try to, you know, knock down that brick wall, or if there's another place where this event can take place. Because in school districts and in bureaucracies, and whether it's public space or wherever it can be, sometimes it's just not the right place for that dream event to happen. And Cynthia, I know you had more to add on this.
Yes, thank you.
That
Very
was
helpful.
that was fantastic. I
Yeah.
wanted to add that I really recommend an initial meeting of all the stakeholders and identify everyone's role, because the accountant maybe really wants to be on the creative team, but isn't on the creative team, but might be blocking or putting up barriers to the I'm making this up. It's you know, there's stay in your lane, blah, 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 but who wants to stay in their lane? Like, it's all fun. We're all in this together, but really understand the stakeholders and come up with your agreements right up front. This is the time to brainstorm. This is how we're going to jury or determine how to make a decision. And this is the timeline in which this falls in, so that also people can self-select adding in that last minute thing. You do want to always create space for that last minute thing. I always create space in case Michelle and Barack Obama show up at the show, like sell it out, but always have 2 good seats just in case. But I think it's a matter of ground agreements and determining everyone's role. And it's not everybody's role. Of all these things we've talked about, it can't all be everybody's role. There has to be an agreed decision maker at what point, and when is not the right time, but when is the time that fits in the timeline that will not hurt the actual event itself.
Thank you. Wow, so many
Both.
gems. Sorry, Sama, you're saying something?
No. Thank you both. That's a lot of great insight. I really appreciate it.
Thank you
Great.
for all your work
Good
in the
luck.
school district. Oh,
Thank you. We've come towards the end, and I want to just ask Cristina and Cynthia, do you have any like closing remarks? You know, one piece of advice, one takeaway you want everybody to have, or any closing remarks as we're taking this event home, so to speak.
this is really hard. When I say know your venue, I'm talking location, location, location. Every venue is different. Know your audience, know your artists, know yourself. Like a good leader, you bring your whole self to it. So know what you're bringing to the party and share that. And just know that all that preliminary work means you're going to be a crowned troubleshooter in real time. So are you calm, pressure. You freak out, everyone's going to freak out. That you have got to lead with calm, troubleshooting, alternatives, and pre-thinking those scenarios. And I want you to remember who's in your kitchen cabinet. When you need a little of this, when you need a little of that, there's different people in your life that can support you. And I hope that we now qualify to be in your kitchen cabinet for the way you want to lead your life. You don't know what the path is until you're in retrospect. So just go for it and have your first aid kit. You always need a Band-Aid. Oh my God, there is one last thing. You're a pro when you always have a Sharpie, because you never know when you're gonna have to make a sign that didn't print out or the printer breaks. All right, there we go. A Sharpie.
Wow, thank you. Thank you, Cristina.
I +1 the Sharpie. I'll also add to it some gaff tape. It will definitely help you in many, many situations. One thing that we talked about when we were meeting before this is that no matter where you are, no matter what kind of event it is, you always have to remember to give thanks to the artists that are on stage, to your team, to yourself. It's something that we all forget to do because we're on to the next. But I have had so many great connections. I'm a big fan of like handwritten cards or like an email right after the event of just saying, like, thank you for what you did to make this go off without a hitch, because we don't do it alone. And we oftentimes forget that step to thank ourselves, to thank our team, to thank the artists. And it really goes a long way. I've gotten jobs because of those little thank you cards. I've had friendships that lasted decades because of those little things. Radical gratitude, yes. And in that spirit, thank you, Anne. Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you, Emilio. Thank you, Noel, all of you for being here. Thank you so much for allowing us to talk about this work that we love so much.